Welcome everybody, good evening to today's webinar of MNSTRY about the importance of sports nutrition in ski mountaineering. There will be a few more people to join, but we will start now, and I would like to welcome our today's guests. So by the way, I'm Toby from MNSTRY. I'm working in the marketing department, and we'll have two experts who will give us great insights into the world of ski mountaineering, into the world of carbs and everything what is connected to it. And first of all, welcome Antonia Niedermeyer. She is professional ski mountaineer and cyclist for the UCI Women's World Team Canyon SRAM Sondercrypto. And she's quite active and successful in ski mountaineering since her childhood. As I said, we will get a lot of great insights by her. And as you can see, she has quite a big palmarès with some important wins and milestones in her ski mountaineering career so far. Secondly, I'd like to welcome Robert Gorgos. He's one of the product developers for MNSTRY at MNSTRY and kind of the brain of this great company and our great products. And Robert, I think we will start now. So I hand over the word to you. Before I do that, one more information. The webinar will take approximately 45 minutes. You're invited to put down all your questions into the chat, and we will have a short Q&A session at the end, and so every question will be dealt. Robert, let's start.
Yeah, welcome everyone. Good evening. I'm really excited to welcome Antonia tonight. We know each other since a few years. She actually lives quite close to my place, and I sometimes see her in training, but not so often because she's mostly on the road for cycling or ski mountaineering. But I'm super excited to share this with Antonia tonight. And yeah, ski mountaineering, I don't have to tell you guys, is a really exciting sport. I actually love doing it myself. This year is not so much snow in southern Bavaria, and mostly you have to go on the ski slopes that are made with artificial snow, but I'm still hoping for some snow to come. So, but this will not be the topic tonight. We will mostly talk about the physiology in endurance sports and carbohydrate usage. And you see some basics we found out in cycling. I think a big difference between cycling and ski mountaineering is that in cycling you can easily measure your power output, and this is still not possible in ski mountaineering. So we can see some differences and some things that are quite the same in both sports. We will then see why carbohydrates are the fuel of choice in endurance sports. One important topic will be why the VO2 max is so important and ways to improve the VO2 max. Then we will see, and Antonia will also share her personal experience here, how you fuel easy and hard or intensive workouts on skis. And in the end, feel free to ask questions, and we can discuss the topics we talked about tonight. So I would like to start with the physiology of endurance sports. And actually, I'm really excited that I got some data from Antonia, from a world-class female athlete. And you can easily measure, or it's not so easy, but you can measure your performance basics measured in the VO2 max, the maximum amount of oxygen you can inhale in milliliters per minute based on your body weight. So I got this data from 2 years ago, I think, Antonia, from a lab test in cycling. And probably in ski mountaineering, this number would be even a little bit higher because you engage more muscles during the movement of ski mountaineering. So I bet this would be in the mid-70s for Antonia, so a really high number. And this is called the aerobic capacity. And the other measurement you can measure especially when measuring lactate levels during a performance test, is an anaerobic capacity, or called VLA max, measured in millimole lactate per second. And for a pure endurance specialist like Antonia is, this number is quite low. So typically, like a Grand Tour rider in cycling, or maybe in ski mountaineering, it would be someone who's specialized in more the longer distances, like the individuals, or maybe a vertical, would have a lower VLA max compared to a sprinter. So in cycling, a sprinter would be, a pure sprinter would be pretty high with 0.8, and someone who does like classics or is a sprinter competing in the Tour de France would be around 0.65 or 0.7. What does this mean? You can see this here in an example. This is actually the calculated carbohydrate usage and the fat burned on the left side with Antonia's real numbers, and on the right side if she would turn into a sprinter. So on the left side you see that the curve of the burning of carbohydrates rises exponentially, and it has like a pretty low percentage of carbohydrates burned in the lower regions of her power output. And after, let's say, around 220 watts, the carbohydrate usage rises exponentially. With fat, it's quite the opposite. So it rises in the beginning, reaches a maximum in the so-called fat max, and then goes down. And when she reaches her threshold, the fat burned is going towards zero. I know this is not like a number we can measure in ski mountaineering. There we would be more prone to use the RPE, or your feel, you would say, how hard the training feels, or your heart rate. And then you could see, okay, my typical heart rate when going easy is, Antonia, what's your typical heart rate when going easy on skis uphill?
Yeah, like I would say around 130 to 135, something like this. Yeah.
Yeah. So pretty low, also a sign of a very efficient metabolism, of a big lung and a very trained heart. So so low heart rate means more fat burned, and higher heart rate. What would be your threshold heart rate?
I would say like threshold would be 175 to 180.
Yeah.
Something like this.
So when she reaches the threshold, the carbohydrate turnover is super high. You see here that it's around 220 to 240 grams per hour, and the fat turnover is then going towards zero. And on the right side, you see a typical sprinter with the same aerobic capacity, the same VO2 max of 71 in cycling, or probably in ski mountaineering a little bit higher. But there you see that the carbohydrate usage is a lot higher. This type of athlete would be a more inefficient athlete, kind of. And with the individual muscle structure, or the muscle fiber structure, would be quicker in like shorter distance sprints, but would be not as efficient in carbohydrate usage. And you see here that when we compare the left side, let's say in the 200 watts region, Antonia now burns around 60 grams of carbs per hour. And if she turned into a sprinter, she would burn more than double the amount of carbs. And that's why you see here, also based on the individual metabolic profile, carbs are, especially when you train a lot or when you train with high intensity, are definitely very important fuel sources. And this is something I can show you here. On the left side, you see a typical now cycling training. Like I said, in ski mountaineering, it would be measured with the heart rate or RPE of 3 hours of base training, and there she burns close to 2,000 kilocalories and still 140 grams of carbs. On the right side, you see a typical training with high intensity, so 4x4 VO2 max training, in cycling at around 300 watts. In ski mountaineering, the goal here would be to reach towards the end of each interval a heart rate that is higher than 90% of a maximum heart rate. And she would warm up with so-called 40-20, so 40 minutes almost all out and 20 seconds easy. And there she burns a little bit less of total energy, but kind of the same amount of carbs, a little bit more, but it's not that much more. So you see what I want to say or want to show you, that even in easy training and even with a really high aerobic capacity, you still are burning a lot of carbohydrates. So carbs are the fuel of choice, and we measure this is the differentiation between kilojoules and kilocalories. So we can measure in cycling, we can measure the kilojoules simply by using the power meters. Like I said, in ski mountaineering, it would be based on heart rate, and most modern watches already show you a number of kilocalories burned, but the kilocalories would be the real energy used, because your efficiency is not exactly 1:4, because this is the turnover energy from kilojoules to kilocalories. So the kilojoules would be a little bit less and the kilocalories a little bit more. So nevertheless, carbs are the fuel of choice, especially when you train a lot, especially when you train every day, especially when you do some high intensity stuff as well. And here is a kind of overview what I want to show you. The more you train, the more energy you burn. The more energy you burn, the more carbs are used, and the more carbs are used, the more you need to replace. I actually don't know, maybe we can discuss this in the end, how the nutrition is used in a sport of ski mountaineering, how developed the knowledge is here. I can only tell you that from my work in professional cycling, nutrition is super important. And in the last years, the turn towards more carbohydrates has really showed, even in the media. I just read an article on Velo News, an American cycling magazine, how professional cyclists feel different by using more carbohydrates. Maybe in the end we can discuss how this is used in a sport like ski mountaineering. Okay, last words from me, then I will also hand over more to Antonia. Here's some important topics why carbohydrates are so important and the fuel of choice, especially also during training. And these are some points that we found out in the last years in our work with professional athletes, that when athletes maybe that are used to not use as much carbohydrates during training change to using more carbohydrates in training, they just feel better performance, especially in the second part of a training. Less stress hormones are released, less proteins are used as an energy source. Therefore, possibly, like in a sport of ski mountaineering, for sure not unimportant, there's no or lower risk of injury. And this maybe is a very important, or maybe the most important topic. Outside of training, you're not going to your fridge and eating everything inside, but you are not so hungry after training that you make better food choices. So the quality of nutrition outside of training increases, and therefore possibly your health and your recovery. And what is also important, that high quality carbohydrate foods, let's say outside of training, are also a good source of macro and micronutrients. So yeah, I think if you haven't experienced it yourself yet, you need to try how it feels to fuel your workouts better. And I've never heard anyone saying, oh, I feel the same or worse when I fuel my workouts properly. In all cases, it always led to a better performance, especially long term when you watch from year to year. Sorry, one more topic from me. Important when you use a lot more energy in training, when you train a lot, I don't think there's a need to ingest a lot more fat. Just watch your fat quality and try to find good sources of essential fatty acids. We covered this topic in other webinars, maybe some nuts, some olive oil, some olives, some natural sources of fats. Also some saturated fat is okay, like butter, but in modest amount is a good procedure. And same for protein. Just by eating more and eating natural food sources also of carbohydrates, you also get the protein needed. Try to get some good quality protein in every meal. Don't overindulge on protein. Try to time it equally for every meal, and then there will be no problem of meeting your protein goals. And this is also a super important topic. So as long as you ingest enough carbohydrates, and as long as your energy deficiency is not super high, proteins are not really used as an energy source. So this is also like a protein protective or amino acid protective aspects of eating enough carbohydrates. So you see here one example of a comparison of two different VO2 max numbers. Antonia, what do you think? Did your VO2 max increase even more in the last 2 years, or what is your feeling?
Yeah, definitely, it's my feeling. Especially when I started with cycling, I had not really a clue about nutrition and like fueling and training. And when I joined the team, we started to work on it, and I really felt like, as I said before, I felt a difference. Like I'm not as tired as I was before. In the end of the training, I feel like for the next training, I feel more powerful, and yeah, it showed me that especially carbs and training are super important to improve like everything, not just the VO2 max, like also endurance rides and yeah, as I said, also recovery.
So we see here a typical VO2 max of maybe a very good amateur athlete, a very good female amateur athlete on the right side, and Antonia's VO2 max, maybe it's like we said, maybe even higher already on the left side. And you see that all aspects of performance, not just the VO2 max, is higher. The power output on the threshold is like 0.6 watts per kilogram higher only by a higher VO2 max. The fat max is also 0.6 watts per kilogram higher with just the higher VO2 max. And the difference between, let's say here, close to 64 and 71 could be something that you lose like by not training for a month, for example. So VO2 max is super important, especially in a sport like ski mountaineering. It is also super important how much you weigh. This webinar is not about ways to like decrease your body fat levels, but because it goes uphill most of the time, you have to carry your body weight, and the combination of a high VO2 max and a good efficiency, let's say how high you can or how much you can use, or how many percentage, or how high the percentage of the usage of the VO2 max for a long time is super important for a vertical or an individual race. Please correct me, Antonia, but I think only the sprint distance is Olympic, right? They changed this.
Yeah, exactly. Like the sprint and the mixed relay are Olympic. Yeah.
But the Olympic disciplines are like more short or super hard efforts over a shorter period of time. So there we have the demands of the competition. So I think for those kind of competitions, your anaerobic capacity is also quite important. And to be still efficient, you need a super high VO2 max, and you also need, let's say, an average or medium VLA max. Maybe for a sprint, for a typical sprinter, the VLA max should be even a little bit on the higher end, maybe 0.7 or so. And there's a lot of ways to train both things. I think today we will more focus on the VO2 max. And one of the best ways to improve your VO2 max is just training volume. I mean, like we saw in the some of the earlier pictures, the energy turnover, also the oxygen turnover, even if it's not as high, but over a longer time, generates a great stimulus for VO2 max. Maybe Antonia, do you know how many hours you trained last year, maybe compared to your junior years? How did this volume increase look for you?
Yeah, especially when I started with cycling, it increased a lot. So I think when I was junior, I had like 17 hours a week, and now I have like 20 to 25 hours a week.
Okay, so this sums up to like 800 to 1,000 hours per year around.
Yeah.
In the junior years, it was probably more like 500 to 650 or so.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So these are like the typical numbers of a world-class athlete. In cycling, it's I wouldn't say easy, but it's pretty easy on your joints, so you can do a lot of hours. When you're a runner, it's a little bit harder, but still volume is the best way to increase your VO2 max. Most of us don't have 1,000 hours per year to train, so some other strategies also include some intensity training, for sure. Also for you, Antonia, maybe you can take us on a journey. How does your intensity training or typical intensity VO2 max session look for you on skis? How would you do this?
Yeah, like I have a really different training the whole week, but like a typical VO2 max is like, for me, I really like to do like 40-20s on ski or 30-30. So that's a quite nice training. And then you have like 10 times repeated, and then you have 3 blocks or 4 blocks. That's a really nice training. It can also fit like in a 2-hour block of training if you don't have that much time. So that's a training I really like, and I do quite often.
So the idea behind those kind of micro intervals, or also called Tabata intervals, is to shoot your oxygen uptake, or to shoot it high, or to increase it in a quick time by high intensity. And with those micro intervals or the short rest periods, your body is not really decreasing his or her oxygen uptake, and then it stays high, and it reaches already a very high amount, in ideal scenario over 90% of your absolute VO2 max after maybe 3 repetitions. And if you do 10, you have like a very high oxygen uptake over a long time. And if you do this in like blocks of 3 or 4 times, 10 times 40-20, then the maximum amount of oxygen turnover is super high. And this is kind of the goal of this training. There's also other methods to do, to create a high oxygen turnover. Like I showed you here, I'll show you here some other impressions. Like the Norwegians like to do a lot of threshold training. because they see the training more of like a day-to-day thing. And the more you can train from day to day, the more energy and oxygen you can turn over a long period of time. So this is also something that is possible. Or Eddie Merckx, still the most successful professional cyclist, once said, ride as much or as little or as long or as short as you feel, but ride. So the consistent training is super important just to get better in your VO2 max. Maybe it's not even the most scientific training method, but if you can stay healthy over a longer period of time, if you put in your specific training, if you go easy on the easy days and hard on the hard days, with the idea behind that if you go easy, you are fresh for the hard days and can do this properly and don't burn out on the easier days by going too hard, then this is, I think, a very, very important day. Very, very important topic to consider. So sometimes also the training methods change a little bit. Your body is adapting to everything and you need to give new stimulus with different training approaches. I think, Antonia, for you, the typical build-up is not so long in cycling. So probably you start training in November or so, and the first races are starting when?
So I have my next race actually next week. So it starts quite early, yeah.
So less than 3 months of preparation period. In other sports it's different, like in triathlon, or maybe even in ski mountaineering, you have a long build-up period over the whole summer, and then you have a shorter racing period that is typically somewhere in from, let's say, mid-November till probably early April. Like I think the last World Cups take place somewhere there, and still a long period. And in order to really improve your VO2 max, I think this is a common sense right now in all endurance sports. It's not just base training for the ski mountaineers in summer, but a really versatile training, also including some intensity already in the early preparation period. Okay, here I give you an example. What is the difference regarding the fueling of an easy training? We also want to improve our fat burning capacity and should consider a little bit of physiology here. So one aspect we used in professional cycling, like I said, I worked 7 years for a professional men's cycling team, is we started using like a progressive fueling strategy for easy workouts, with the idea that in the beginning of a training, especially when you do like a high carb nutrition regime, the muscle glycogen level is high. And then in the first 1 or 2 hours, the carbo feeding or the amount of carbohydrates that should be fed should be rather low, or maybe something like slow carb or slow release carbohydrate can make sense here, just to like make sure you hydrate properly and can sustain the power that is needed to have a training stimulus. In the middle, let's say, of a 6-hour training ride or a longer ski mountaineering tour, the glycogen levels are getting depleted and the turnover of fat increases automatically. And to sustain a good training quality and all the other topics that we mentioned before, something between, let's say, also depending on your metabolic profile, something in between 20 and 60 grams of carbs should be fed here. And later in the long training session or the tour, the carbohydrate intake can increase up to even 120 grams per hour, just to finish the training fresh, not risk any kind of injury. Maybe if you're going down on skis, really have fun skiing down. And also at the same time, and this is super interesting, train the gut, because this is something you will need when you really do like long racing, when you do, let's say, an individual race, then yeah, you should ingest more than something you are used to in training, with maybe 60 grams, and then something between, let's say, 90 and 120 grams per hour is super interesting. When you do high intensity training, then it looks a little bit different. Maybe Antonia, you can let us know how you do it with like easy and high intensity training. How does your fueling look like?
Yeah, as you said, when we have like low intensity, we have like 60 grams per hour is the goal. So also in the beginning, we try to fuel with slow carb and then going high in the end. And in intensity training, we have to go like 80 to 100 grams per hour. For me, it works out well with the fast carb because I think it's easier to drink than to eat. So I feel for me, it's easier to take the carbs with the drinks. But I also take like the gels and yeah, like also I really like the bar, the intensity bar. I think it's really easy to eat. But yeah, for competitions, for me, the number one is like the gels, also the caffeine gels. And yeah, also try to train the carbo load in training, because when you're at the competition and all of a sudden you have to take like 120 grams per hour and you're not used to it, then yeah, maybe you can get a little bit sick or something. So it's also the goal to train it for the competitions.
Yeah. From the physiology side, you would say you also try to train your transporters in your intestines. So there's a transporter for glucose that can be trained, and there's also a transporter for fructose that should be trained. And if you use both through like a fueling strategy that has glucose, like for example maltodextrin as a glucose source, and also fructose, then you are used to it and you can use higher amounts when it really counts in the competition. What is also super interesting is like the nutrition outside of training. When you also have a higher carbohydrate intake outside of training, you also train those transporters. So what we often see is that athletes who like tend towards a lower carbohydrate regime outside of training have problems of digesting high amounts of carbohydrate in competition. So this is all kind of working and together, and it's this system is something that is used in high performance endurance sports for I would say in the last 7 to 8 years with great success. And I think there's probably no other way at the moment out of this, but of course you always have to see your individual needs. When you're recreational athletes and you're going super easy and your absolute power is not that high, then also the absolute energy turnover and the absolute carbohydrate turnover is not that high. So I don't think it makes sense if you're not that fit, let's say it like this, and you're going easy to ingest 120 grams of carbs per hour. This makes no sense. But some fueling also in easy training for those athletes makes sense. I would say a general number could be 40 grams when going easy and 80 grams when going hard. When you want to take it like to the basics, then this could be a good number. But for sure, it's interesting to know your profile. Like we created a software that you could use and to see what is your metabolic profile and how much energy you need when you go easy, how much do you need when you go hard, how many grams of carbs do you need, and how much carbs do you need per day, how much for an easy workout, how much for a hard workout. I think to have a rough idea is super important. So Antonia, we talked a little bit for this webinar, but now I'm also really curious because we didn't talk about this specifically. So what is your preferred nutrition choice? outside of training? Was it a typical breakfast for like an easy, in German we say Skitour, like a ski mountaineering expedition, I would say in English? What is your typical menu when you do intervals like VO2 max training? What do you use after training? What's a dinner you like? What is your experience here?
Yeah, for me, the most important thing is breakfast, to be honest. But it was always like this, like without breakfast, better not talk to me. So I really like to eat like a slice of bread with avocado or with egg or something like this, and like a nice porridge with some berries and some nuts and a little bit honey or something like this. And I vary it a little bit. When I have more intensity, then I eat a little bit more of that, and if it's less intensity, eat a little bit less. So that's like a typical breakfast for me. And then most of the time I'm training over the lunchtime. So for lunch I don't have that much. I just, when I come home, most of the time I have a recovery shake, and then I look that I have like a nice snack or something, and cook my dinner afterwards. And for dinner I love to have like a bowl with a lot of different things. Like I have salad in there, and then maybe some mango or something fruity, and then some carbs, like really different, like from bulgur to couscous, rice, everything a little bit. And then I like to have like some mozzarella or some protein sources. And that's like a typical dinner for me then.
Sweets?
I forgot to say that the most important thing, like I love to have, before I go to bed, like a little snack, like yogurt with some fruits and some nuts, a little bit of granola. That's really like my must-have before I go to bed.
Cool. So this is also a good example. Like if you train a lot of hours and you don't really have lunch, then the importance of during training nutrition is even higher, because the energy turnover is so high that you couldn't catch up just by having dinner. So what would be like you said, you have after training, you have a snack. Is this bread, or what would this be?
Yeah, it depends, like what I want. Like sometimes I feel like I want to have like a bread with something nice on it, some jam or some whatever. And sometimes I also want to have like some oats or some rice pudding or something like this. It's also a really nice meal for me. So but for sure after the ride I need something. But like I'm not the one who's like cooking lunch, and then I like to have dinner, like have my time and prepare everything nice. So it's also nice because like rice pudding or porridge you can prepare before your ride, and then you have it right after the ride and can eat it straight after.
But I think Antonia's menu example showed us that outside of training, the nutrition quality or the intake of essential healthy foods is like takes an important place. And she always looks that there's in every meal there's some fruit or vegetables, there's a little bit of protein, there's a good source of carbohydrates that also, like I said, have macro and micronutrients. So overall, the nutrition quality is super high. And if Antonia, please correct me, but if you didn't fuel your workouts, then this would be a problem, because you would be very hungry when you come home, and probably the nutrition quality would be a little bit less.
Yeah, definitely. I also felt like when I started to fuel proper in training, I came home and I was not like, oh, I need anything from the fridge. I was just like, a snack would be nice, but then I'm not like super hungry, and also feeling like a little bit weak and cold. And since I started to fuel right in training, it stopped, and I really feel like strong and healthy when I come back from training.
Cool. This was also an example. Antonia, you're a vegetarian, right? But the only things you yeah, you eat milk products and eggs, but no meat. And yeah, with a good or a well-planned diet, this is totally possible, even in a world-class endurance athlete. But maybe in altitude training, you need to take care of your iron levels, or how does that look like?
Yeah, definitely. So when we go on altitude, for sure you need to take like supplements for iron, especially if you don't eat meat. So yeah, we start to take it a week before the altitude camp, and then we take it over the altitude camp and the week afterwards. So our iron level is quite high there. But yeah, for sure you need it when you're on altitude.
Okay. Do you do some kind of, maybe that's an a hot topic right now. Do you also do some kind of heat training?
Until now, I'm not really into it, I have to say, but it's a thing we are working on with the team. It's quite interesting, but I have never tried it until now.
Okay, maybe that is something we talked in a earlier webinar, because there's good science that shows that heat training that actually you can do at home. On skis, it might be a little bit harder because you would really need to dress very, very warm to get a heat training effect. But yeah, running it's possible, or inside on the rollers, you can generate a lot of body heat. And yeah, there's good data that shows that you can by heat training, by controlled and planned heat training, you can increase your blood volume, and probably also the density of hemoglobin, like you can do at the same time, or probably better in altitude training. So this is something that we look into for the future, but it's already done a lot in professional cycling.
Yeah.
And that would also be something where you need to watch your iron levels. This was just the connection that I wanted to, or the bridge I wanted to make. Okay, so we're close to 45 minutes. I think, I don't know, Toby, if there's some good question already.
Oh, yeah, we have one question of Barbara, if I pronounce it correctly. I will just try to make it available here. First question is for Antonia. What is a typical length of endurance session on skis?
Yeah, I really like to do like nice proper tour on skis. So it can be like 4 to 5 hours where you really go like, yeah, maybe also twice up the mountain, but also like really low intensity. Maybe you also need some time for this tour because it's really technical or something. But yeah, it could be like 3 to 5 hours, I would say.
Perfect. Then we have a second question. This one is for Robert. I will just insert it. What do you think of differences of CH usage in cold environment when training on skis?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I have to talk a little bit more here. So
no worries.
All the numbers we shared today are like algorithm calculated, or calculated by an algorithm, and it's like it's not like the exact numbers, because measuring the exact amount of carbohydrates burned is not so easy. So we cannot really say, okay, when it's cold you burn this much, when it's hot you burn this much, because we don't know. There's some good data that shows that heat and high temperatures are more stressful to your metabolism than cold temperatures. Probably this is only true to a certain extent. When it's super cold, like not so often the case in Bavaria, for example, where Antonia, she actually is from the next town from where I come from. So if it's minus 20 degrees, this might change. But in normal training temperatures, heat is probably a bigger stress to your system than cold. And I think the numbers we showed today are probably for like an ideal temperature or perfect temperature for training. Let's say 12 degrees Celsius, 15 degrees Celsius. What happens when it's super hot or when it's super cold, we can only estimate. I would say when it's super hot, the usage of carbohydrates is probably a little bit higher. This might also differ from athlete to athlete, heat adapted, non-heat adapted, individual metabolism, how well are you used to train in the heat, to compete in the heat, and same for the cold. So we don't really know. But normally when we look at science, what I know, please correct me if someone else knows more, heat is more of a stress than cold to a certain extent. And I only know from cross-country skiing that it's only allowed to do a competition until minus 18 degrees Celsius. Below that is the competition is canceled. I don't know how it is in ski, or maybe Antonia, you know.
I don't know if there's like a rule for this, to be honest.
Okay, no. But probably it will be similar or the same. Like I would use the same numbers also for what I wanted to say of carbohydrate usage in the cold, and probably in the heat. Your body burns a little bit more because it's a real stressor for your body. And what is also important, that in the cold, the gut works quite well to a certain extent. In the heat, not so much. So in the heat, the carbohydrate limit is a little bit lower. So when it's super hot, you sweat a lot. When your core temperature rises, then the maximum carbohydrate uptake via your intestine is a little bit lower. So if you're normally can digest up to 120 grams, probably then it's just 90 grams or so. What is in the cold, I don't have real numbers, but I think there's not so much of a difference. So even when it's -5, you can still digest 120 grams well, probably in this example.
Thank you, Robert. We have another question from Alex. It's about your opinion on bicarbonate. And do you think it can be implemented in skimo?
Antonia, did you use it before?
I used it once in training, like this training camp. It was quite interesting feeling, I have to be honest. Like if you're not used to it, it's strange in the beginning because you don't have this feeling anymore of the lactate coming into your legs. So it's quite of a, yeah, it's a little bit of a strange feeling, but I feel like it helped to have like not that tired legs, especially on intense days.
So my opinion, yeah, is quite straight. I really like bicarbonate. I think it's a super interesting supplement. I mean, it's part of a cake or a cookie. So I would describe it as rather, it's not really natural in like the 100% definition, but it is something everyone has at home. So it's super interesting to be used. Before we had always the problem with your stomach, because if you take it in a pure form that is not encapsulated, you will not be able to digest it properly. You will get stomach problems. But now it's possible. And I think especially in ski mountaineering, especially for like shorter races, because science says that it helps with your performance up until 10 minutes of a duration. I think it's really interesting. Like Antonia mentioned, your body increases the blood bicarbonate level and can handle H+ ions, a byproduct of high intensity exercise better, and can buffer the H+ ions. And we actually had a webinar about this as well. And therefore you can go a little bit higher. in lactate and H+ ions, and yeah, go a little bit deeper. And this could also be interesting, like Antonia mentioned it, in training, because you create a more of a training stimulus and probably get more adaptation, also talking about mitochondria, and yeah, therefore also VO2 max. So yeah, for sure there's also a downside. You probably gain a little bit of water weight, and if you did use it every day, that wouldn't work. But for some high intensity training sessions or like a sprint race, I would definitely recommend it and try it. And it's yeah, quite interesting, like Antonia also said.
Then we have one more question about sprint races. The man, woman who makes it to the final do 4 runs. There's also pause between the heats. What would be the best strategy? Power carbs, gels, or even to try to get some protein as well?
How did you do it, Antonia?
Honestly, I did not do that much sprint racing because I'm not really a sprinter. But I feel like gels are quite good option for that. I mean, for sure, not in every like pause of heat, but like yeah, for example, when you do like every 4 heats and like every second one, a gel would be a good one for me. But yeah, I don't know. It also depends how you are adapted to gels or to the intake of carbs.
Yeah, I would say it depends. How much time do you have?
Yeah.
For sure, proteins are harder to digest and don't really provide a valuable energy source. So I would focus on carbohydrates. You don't really use up proteins. Of course, you need some proteins, especially after or at the end of the day of such a longer competition day. But I would definitely focus on carbohydrates. It can be anything. Also, depending on your experience, how much carbohydrates you want to use. If you want to use, for example, caffeine for like the final or so, then it's a good idea to have it not too late, because the sprint race is pretty short and it takes some time for the caffeine to be absorbed. So I would take it maybe half an hour before. Yeah, and I would mix it up. Can be power carb, fast carb, can be a gel. If the pause is longer, maybe half of a protein bar or a porridge bar to get some solid food for your stomach. But for sure, focus on carbohydrates.
There are 2 more questions. The next one is for you, Antonia. It's about the FTP. Does your FTP on the bike change during the season? For example, if you compare it to your FTP now with during the season, how big is the difference? Or how big is the improvement you can achieve over months with good training?
Yeah, definitely the FTP is lower in winter and the off season or when you start training. So for sure, if you have like a little bit of a rest after the races and have a little bit of off season, then you start lower. But it's quite fast that you can like train it and get higher again. So yeah, as Robert said before, like we don't have that much time. Maybe we have like 2 or 3 months where we can like really have a proper training and get our FTP on the top again.
Thank you, Antonia. And the last question for now, when should I start to train more high intensity training than low intensity? Or till when should I stay in zone 1 or 2? Let's say the season starts in December.
Well, that's a hard one. You cannot really say for every athlete like do the same or so, because it depends a lot. I mean, what is your metabolic profile? Do you want to increase your VO2 max? Probably always a good idea. If you've done like endurance sports for, I give like an extreme example, for 50 years, then it's probably not so easy to improve your VO2 max even more than it's only like holding your VO2 max. or are you a really fast twitch athlete that probably with a lot of high intensity training will like make the anaerobic capacity even higher, but to the cost of the aerobic capacity. So it depends a lot, but I would recommend to always do some high intensity training just to train your systems, train the maximum aerobic capacity. And the modern training strategy is to start maybe 1, 2, 3 weeks easy, with mostly after a longer pause, with mostly like zone 1, zone 2 training, maybe incorporate some zone 2 intervals or so if you're like a high performant athlete. And then after a few weeks already start with VO2 max intervals. And you can also build this up, maybe not starting with 4 by 10 minutes, 40-20, but maybe with like 2 by 10 minutes or so, or with some other forms, and then go higher from there. But I think it's a good idea to do some kind of intensity almost all year round. For sure not in your off season, because it's my opinion, because you also need some time to recover your hormonal system and to not be kind of on the limit all the time. But there's all kinds of strategies. But I would answer this question with like, when you start racing in December and you have a break maybe in April, and you probably do in May, you do something like really versatile training and do a lot of other things, then for sure in June you would start with already some VO2 max stimulus.
There is one more question from Vincent, if I pronounce it correctly. I think it's French. How do you choose the glucose to fructose ratio, speaking about carbohydrates?
Yeah, it depends a little bit, or not a little bit. It depends on how many carbohydrates you want to ingest per hour. Like I said, you have those transporters that are made to transport glucose, and others are made to transport fructose, and they are limited. So the glucose transporter can transport 60 grams per hour. If you're trained and at the same time use some fructose, is a little bit higher, can be maybe 70 grams. This is also very hard to measure, so we cannot really tell for every athlete. And the fructose transporter can do almost the same. So if your goal is just 60 grams per hour, then just glucose is fine. If it's 70, 80, 90 grams, then probably the ratio should be 4-1, 3-1, 2-1. And if you want to go super high, 120, 130 grams, then the fructose ratio should be higher. So it could be 1-0.8. We have all kind of mixtures in our product range. So I don't think you have to have a lot of fructose when you don't go that high in carbs per hour. And maybe keep those higher fructose intakes for like train the gut sessions, or when you want to go super high. And maybe also interesting that, like we said before, you can train those transporters also outside of training. So Antonia, you mentioned you like some honey in your breakfast or some fruit with fructose sources. So you also train your GLUT5 transporter. So, and you also increase the possible maximum carbohydrate uptake per hour outside of training. Or when you have some banana after training, there's also some fructose in it. Or the recovery shake contains half glucose, half fructose. So all those things also train your transporters and maximize the carbohydrate uptake, or the possible carbo uptake per time. So yeah, like I said, it depends.
Perfect. And then we have reached the 1 hour mark. I think that's a good point to start finishing off this webinar. If there are not any more questions from the community.
I have a question to Antonia.
Okay. I mean,
Antonia, what is your feeling? What do you really still like doing ski mountaineering, or do you in your head did you change completely to cycling, or in winter what do you like better, skiing or cycling?
Yeah, it's a question everyone asks me. So I only have one answer. Like, I really love both. Like, my heart will always be at skimo because it's the sport I grew up with, and yeah, it's where my heart is. But for sure, I also love cycling. It's also my 4th year now in the team, and yeah, I really love this sport. I love how professional it is, and the whole surrounding, and yeah, I really like both of it. But in winter, for sure, when there's so much snow and I see everyone is on the ski, I'm also really jealous of the boys and girls who are at the World Cups. I also wish I was there sometimes. I try to, but it's not that easy with professional cycling to combine both. But yeah, I love both of it.
Yeah, we have also a good example in men's cycling with Tony, who comes from ski mountaineering and still likes doing it for training, but doesn't do any races anymore. And yeah, there are some parallelities. You for sure need a high VO2 max for both. You shouldn't be too heavy for both, so it's a really interesting combination. But I still think, it's my opinion, that even if you train some more skiing in winter, it could still benefit you on the bike, because yeah, you can for sure train your VO2 max and your endurance, your aerobic capacity on skis quite well, because you use a lot of muscle. And maybe one last question. You mentioned it already a little bit. So in cycling, nutrition is a super important part. In ski mountaineering, probably not that much, or how was it?
Yeah, I feel also in cycling, it took a long time that it got that important as it is now. So I think in ski mountaineering, maybe it's not that important until now and not that professional. But I hope it's changing, because it's such an important theme. And I think everyone should know about a good nutrition in sport, especially if you do it professional. So yeah, I hope that something is changing there, and I see also the interest is there, and it's nice to see that also Skimo Stats is doing something with you guys, and yeah, it's nice to see that some professionality is coming into nutrition in ski mountaineering.
Thank you.
Such nice words till the end. Thank you, Antonia, for joining. And as I already wrote in the chat, there's a little surprise for everyone, because as we said, we would like to get all Skimo athletes to try out the perfect nutrition. And this is your chance. You can save 50% on the tasting box with the discount code SKIMO50. It is valid until 10th of February. And as I already wrote in the chat, the webinar will be uploaded on YouTube. So feel free to share the link. I'm really sure we will post something on Skimo Stats. Feel free to share the link within the athlete community. And yeah, then I would just say thank you to Antonia. Thank you for taking time. I really appreciate it. And
thanks very much, Antonia. That was great.
Yeah, thank you. Right? Thank you, and I really appreciate your work. It's a great work, and I products, I have to say, really.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And thank you, Robert. And thank you, everybody, for joining this webinar. And by that, we say goodbye and see you next time.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.